Okay, colleagues, we're starting in, I think, a couple of minutes. As this conference is about connection, chat with each other would be nice. You want to. Okay, I'm hearing a bell ringing downstairs, which I think it's the sign that school starts. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session titled From Data to Decision, the Role of Knowledge Management and Communication in Evidence-Based Decision-Making. My name is Anna Guerraggio. I'm an evaluator, and I'm also the Chief of Engagement and Communication at UNDP. Today I have the pleasure to moderate this session, and as part of that I do a little bit of housekeeping before we start. So as you know, the session will be about 90 minutes. We have 4 incredible presentations by our distinguished speakers today, whom I will introduce shortly, followed by panel discussion and then some Q&A. As you know by now, there is a simultaneous translation available. You have other tech tools at the help desk if you need. And the session is also live streamed on Zoom, so remember to smile because you might be captured on camera. And that's a reminder to myself as well. So the topic we reflect today is very dear to my heart, and it's something of absolute importance. So I've done my self-evaluation for about 20 years now, and I've struggled a lot and also learned how important it is, that last mile. The one that goes from the time we finish the report and we produce our evaluation insights to when we send it out to colleagues in our organizations, when we send it to decision makers or to the public. And also I learned how this last mile, the communication about the report, has been for too long conceived as a separate thing. So we always consider the evaluation process in 3 phases. So we plan, we do the research, and then we communicate. But we also learn how this doesn't work. So it works when we talk about what in IO we call the external communication, so the communication to the general public and the people who may be interested in our report. But it doesn't work when we talk about internal or strategic communication. We can't separate the 3 phases. So we need to start thinking about evaluation, not something distinct like a report, but something that is part of a decision-making process. And what we're doing at the UNDP Independent Evaluation Office, and very happy to talk to you separately about it, is actually using communication as an entry point to change how we do evaluations. But now, without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker of today, Patrizia Cocca. Patrizia, a fellow Italian and a Fulbright scholar, is the Knowledge Management and Communication Lead of the Global Evaluation Initiative, or GEI for short. Patrizia has been for 20 years at the forefront of transforming our global organization, share knowledge, and communicate their vision. A passionate advocate for the power of information, Patrizia has crafted innovative digital platforms that have empowered millions across the globe. From promoting environmental sustainability to driving cultural and educational outreach, her work ensures that vital knowledge is accessible to all. So Patrizia, look forward to hearing from you. You have about 10 minutes. I will let you know when you are about to cross that line. We're very inclusive, so you can sit, you can stand, you can use your hands, as in Italian do, or you cannot, whatever you feel pleased to do. Over to you.
Thank you. So, yes, I've been 20 years in communication. This means that I've seen pretty much everything you can see when it comes to communications. And I have to say that the field of evaluation has been particularly challenged, because when we talk about evaluation, we are talking about results that needs to be presented, and sometimes results that are not exactly flattering to the person that is receiving it. So what do we do, and how do we do this when we need to communicate? So in a few weeks back, I have been again in a panel with Christian and a few other colleagues, and Josephine was there too, and we were talking about communication tricks and tips about what you can do to communicate better. But there was one issue that came out, which was the issue of trust. So today I decided to focus on that, because I thought that was really at the heart of what we communicate. We can communicate in many ways. We can communicate in a very relatable way, but if there is no trust, then the message doesn't go across. So basically, the issue of trust, to me, boiled down to these actions or things that you need, principle that you need to consider when you are using communication to transmit your evaluation findings. Somebody suggested me to use an acronym to make it memorable, so that's why you have this Veritas. And it's also play a little bit with the word truth in Latin, so I think that can be relatable and hopefully memorable. So when we're talking about voices, the first thing has been using trusted messengers, right? So we're talking about associating ourselves with reputable institutions, reputable people that can bring our message forward and not shoot ourselves in the foot, right? Being associated with the wrong party, with the wrong, or seeing being seen associated with the wrong party can be really what is going to kill our message. So one is choose the messenger right, for the right audience, of course, right? And then we have the second part is the ethics, acknowledge bias and ethical consideration. We all have bias, and we all inadvertently use them or not, but it would be is a part of an ethical consideration to be fair and say this might be the bias that have been that are in our evaluation. These might be things that we need to make sure that we consider when we are reading these reports. And this is also builds trust. The third point would be relationship. Foster long-term connections. This talks about the issue of building trust among people that are going to work with each other. This is very true when we're talking about building trust among those that are in the same office, but also those that work in different institutions, but they still need to coordinate among each other. At the heart of communication, personal relationship is what really are going to make the difference between being heard and being ignored sometimes. And then there is the issue of integrity, which to me is really the heart of trust, which is trying to address the possibility that there may be, there is no manipulation in our process, that our process has been honest, and that we are going to explain how we are conducting evaluations and how we are presenting them. Transparency. So the T for transparency is to ensure rigorous and transparent methods, which in other words can be objectivity. So how objective we are. We need to build confidence in the findings that we have had, and therefore evaluators need to provide a transparent pathway from the way the data is being collected to the findings of the presentation. A for accessibility. Present your findings in an accessible and relatable way. This is what mostly we have been often talking when we talk about communications in evaluation, but to me is just one little part of that. But it is still very, very important because we need to speak the language of the person that is receiving the message. And when I talk about language, it's not about only French or English or Spanish or whatever is your language, or Chinese, but it's really like, is this something that I can understand? Is it too technical? Not technical enough. So this is the kind of questions that we need to ask ourselves when we present our evaluation. And then finally, the S for stakeholders, engagement. This engagement often comes a little too late. And as Anna was just saying, it's not about, communication shouldn't be the last step in the evaluation process. It should be really early on. Why? Several reasons, but for me, one of the most important is that stakeholders that have been engaged since the very beginning are also the ones that can help us to request that the evaluation findings are going to be public and therefore shared with as many people as possible. This ensures transparency, ensures accountability, and ensure that the evaluation findings are not just going to be used by those that have commissioned the evaluation, but also by others that might learn from it. So this is my Veritas acronym. And so I wanted to bring just a couple of examples of how the GEI is trying to foster trust in the messages that we promote. Now, the GEI, the Global Evaluation Initiative, the mission is to strengthen capacity building in monitoring and evaluation. We do not perform evaluation, only seldomly, and these are usually for capacity building purposes. So this is not really our goal, our need, but still, if we are talking about what we do, we need to build trust in the process. So one of the ways in which we thought that a story can come across and really be relatable has been talking about, of course, people. Everybody can relate to people. A story, a personal story, is more relatable than 100 pages of findings and data. And I have here my colleague Graham. He has been the author of this last story that we have posted very recently, and that I think really in few words have been able to explain how we are doing things in the GEI and how our work is impacting at the end also the lives of people that are on the ground and that are very far removed from us, but sometimes are really, really like we from many steps away, we can really improve the policies and therefore the lives. So I would invite you to scan the QR code. You can see the entire story. It's just 2 pages long, because this is also the quality of a good communication. It should be short, brief, to the point, and therefore you can read by yourself and let us know if we manage to come across and get our points across. Another way in which we try to build trust and is actually trying to build a movement. Now, you have been listening. NEC is another movement, is another way that the UNDP and GEI has been trying to create a movement about national evaluation capacity. And we are talking about evaluations, and we're talking about monitoring when we are getting together every year for GLOCAL. GLOCAL is an evaluation week that we have organized every year since 2019, and has been really a growing movement. This year, these are just a little bit of numbers for this year's GLOCAL, but we had 367 events all over the globe. These are mostly online events. They are not organized by the GEI alone. The GEI has only one little fraction, but we do coordinate the platform and we do coordinate the work that goes around this. But it's thanks to volunteers, it's thanks to organizations that are really willing to share what they have learned, is that GLOCAL can become a success. And so you can see by yourself the numbers and the incredible things that have been discussed. Again, a QR code will bring you to the website where we have posted the proceedings of whoever has submitted. And then last but not least, we have something else that I wanted to share, which is an information platform, betterevaluation.org. So Better Evaluation is a website, but has been also the source of information for evaluators for over a decade. So before it used to be an NGO, 3 years ago it became part of the GEI, and since then we have managed, and the amount of user is for an evaluation website is pretty great. So we have a lot of page views, a lot of users, a lot of resources for evaluators, resources for policymakers, and you can see how by sharing knowledge we are trying to create capacities in many ways. So, just to conclude, why I'm presenting this seems to be unrelated to the issue of trust, but I think that, and this is a firm belief that I always held in my life, that information is power and you need to be able to access easily. And the more easy is the access and the more you share information, the better you can have trusted conversation, because then there is the knowledge that is shared on both sides. And with this, I conclude. I look forward to your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Patrizia. In behavioral science, there is another acronym that we use, which is MindSpace, which is quite similar to what you illustrated, and to me speaks to the point that we can't use evaluation in isolation. And actually, if you don't build that trust that you talk about, it's pointless communication in a way. So over to our second speaker, Christian Crespo, who is going to bring us to Chile. Christian is the executive director at the Center for Learning on Evaluation and Results for Latin America and the Caribbean. He has experience in applied research, policy program design, and evaluation for governmental agencies, both at the central and local level, universities, and non-governmental organizations. Christian has helped developing monitoring system, implemented quasi-experimental design, and assessed targeting instruments using administrative datasets. In Chile, Christian served as the head of the research department at the Ministry of Social Development and the Public Policy Evaluation Department of the Undersecretary of Crime Prevention. Christian, same reminder about length of the presentation. I will show you when you get late. Over to you.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Patricia. I'm delighted to be here. I come from probably a very different standpoint as Patricia. I was used to be the guy that was crunching and analyzing the data rather than communicating what we were finding about it. I am an industrial engineer, you know, so to be having a panel with people from the communications field, you know, from some people who work on parliaments, you know, it's very enriching for me, you know, and I hope this presentation will be enriching for you as well, you know. As Anna mentioned, I am the director now of the CLEAR Center for Latin America and the Caribbean. I am Chilean. I come from the national systems of Chile, and that's going to be my presentation about, you know. That's where I can relate to the topic of knowledge management and communication. So before I delve into the topic of communications and knowledge management, I need to explain to you a little bit the monitoring evaluation system in Chile to give you some context. So just to make it quite simple, you know, if you think in a policy that starts, there's a design phase, you know. So there in Chile we have ex-ante evaluation. That's basically design evaluation when program starts. As soon as programs get rolled out, you know, and they're implemented, then you find monitoring. In Chile, we monitor every program per year once, you know, and we have 700 programs. So that means we have 700 reports of monitoring, you know, for social programs and programs that are not social, and it's quite, so we get a lot of information from there to make good decisions, you know. And then we have some, on the long run execution, you know, we have some selective strategic ex post evaluations. Some of them are impact, but some of them are targeting, you know, it's depending on the program. So then we have these other three evaluations, you know. So these three type of evaluations are part of what we call the monitoring and evaluation system in Chile, and they're integrated in many ways. So for example, if we have findings from the monitoring and ex post evaluation that says that the design of the program is poor, then the system makes that programs go to redesign and then to ex-ante evaluation. No? So they're not three isolated boxes, you know, they are integrated one way or the other, you know. And in terms of the institution is the Undersecretary of Social Evaluation in Chile, where I worked before, and the budget office in Chile that are running all this system, you know. And why this is important, you know, and because this is integrated with decision making, you know, like evaluation, it's getting into the machinery of government decisions in Chile, you know. Concretely how? The results of the monitoring evaluation system inform the budgeting process. It does it in 4 ways. First, the programs that are performing poorly in ex post evaluations become conditioned when the budgeting process starts. As well, the programs that are not complying with ex post evaluation commitments or recommendations over a few years, they become conditioned. The programs that are not adopting the monitoring recommendations, and remember, all programs in Chile get monitored each year, they become conditioned. And the programs that has design problems in ex-ante evaluations, they become conditioned, right? And this is just a tag, no? It's just a flag that you're putting on a column, on a paper, or on a system, to just in the next column to the name of the program, you know? And does that matter in any sense, or it doesn't matter? That's the communication tactic, you know? Putting a flag, becoming this condition, right? The programs that don't get this flag are not conditioned, right? And that's the thing that I wanted to bring with you into this conversation or panel, you know? So at the beginning of the budgeting process, of course, budgeting process every year, you know, the finance ministry communicates to each sector the insights of the system, you know, indicating the programs that are conditioned, the flag, the tag I mentioned to you, you know. Does this make a difference for decision making? Does evaluation make a difference for decision making? In this case, budgetary decision making. What do you think? Yeah? Yes, no, it depends, It's going to depend about the incentives and how you really want to move forward with it, We had the same question 5 years ago or 10 years ago when I was working in the Ministry of Social Development. Really, nothing happened with the results of the evaluation. It didn't make any difference in the budgeting process, And people knew this and start working toward it, and start putting these flags and tags, Does it make a difference now for you? What do you think? It does. Now it does, And this is my favorite part, There is a 27-point difference in the resources requested by the own sectors between conditioned and non-conditioned programs. Imagine this, It's very difficult politically to say to one ministry or sector, I'm cutting you the budget for this program in specific. It's rather more strategic to tell them, you have good programs and bad programs. Look, my tags and my recommendations to you, and you make the decision about where do you want to raise your budget, in what programs, your programs, you want to raise your budget, and where you don't want to do this, That's communication, Only communication, which a result of a 27 points in the budget that is requested by their own ministries, The Ministry of Finance just sent the communication, and it was well received by every sector in the country, And then this, one thing is what, of course, in the budget process, what service request, and asking for more money, it's easy, Then, did they get assigned more money in practice? That, of course, relates with the process in Parliament, It did also have implications in terms of budget assignation, A 13-point difference, basically. What happened? The programs that were unconditioned, without tag or red flag, they got, on average, a 3% increase in their budget the next year, while the programs that were conditioned got a 10% reduction in their budget, And of course, I'm not implying by this that programs that are not doing well need to be their budget cut, Some of the programs sometimes implies more resources to get resolved, But this sort of the message that evaluations matter for decisions start getting a ball rolling, And I am showing you this graphic for only 1 year. But this is a cumulative effect because the budgeting process goes year after year. Yeah? And actually, like the Friday before flying here, I am a counselor at the budgeting office, so I saw this graph for this budgeting process, and it was even much larger difference than the one I'm showing you here, So what I'm trying to probably to get conveying in this message, is that really simple activities in communication that has a lot of implications can make a huge difference when we really want to push this forward, We can build a bridge in between the M&E system and decision making. It's hard, it's politically complicated, it's challenging, but it can be done, And one of the key decision-making activities of every government in this planet, and of course of every institution, public institution, is budgeting. And no political authority wants its budget cut. So if you tell them monitoring and evaluation matters, it's a game changer. It's really a game changer. So, key takeaways, I think, for this presentation, how this relates to communications and knowledge management, First, let's do serious work in integrating M&E systems with relevant processes. Budgeting is not the only relevant process, but it is a very important one that's present everywhere, When you ask today to the governments in Latin America and the Caribbean, what is your most important challenges for the ones that are more advanced, all of them tell them use of evidence. We produce good evaluations that are not being taken into account. And Ada is with me on this one because we are speaking about this 2 weeks ago, And This is not being told by me, it's being told by the own leaders and champions of each of the heads of evaluation office in Latin America and the Caribbean. We need to do work integrating this. Signaling, and this pure communications. This knowledge matters. What we are going to learn from these processes is going to have implications. This was just really, believe me, one piece of communications that was sent with the signature of the Ministry of Finance, reinforced in meetings, telling all the ministries, we are going to take into account the results of the monitoring evaluation system. Take you into account these results as well in your own decision making, you know? And that was a game changer. It really was. Finally, of course, this needs to be communicated properly and formally in the public sphere, you know? It can be done. I want to motivate all of you, you know, to start thinking on how small activities like this can really make and have long-term implications for decision-making and improving policy-making in all our governments. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kristen. I really like the part about the fact that you talk about a good use of incentive system, that we don't just set it up and then we pay lip service to it, but it is actually used. And also about the fact that we know where the boundary is. We empower decision makers. That's, you can take decision. That's where my role stops, and then you'll do that. So it was great. Thank you so much for sharing. Now we have our third speaker, Josephine Watera from Uganda. Josephine is a credential evaluator with 17 years of experience in research, evaluation, and evidence use system. She was recognized by the American Evaluation Association as the most promising evaluator from developing countries in 2017 and received the Leadership Award by the African Evidence Network in 2023. Josephine is currently an Assistant Director, Research Services in the Parliament of Uganda, where she previously covered the position of Head of Monitoring and Evaluation. She is Vice President of the Uganda Evaluation Association and a member of several evaluation networks. Josephine has mentored several young and emerging evaluators and supported the development of guidance for responsible evaluation for the World Bank Independent Evaluation Group, as well as the African Evaluation Principles by the Africa Evaluation Association. It's an honor to have you, Josephine.
Yeah, good morning. Pleasure to have you here. And you see, this topic has keywords. It has data, it has knowledge management, and then decision making. So you'll find that all of us have touched a bit of everything. And my perspectives are going to be more in the context of Parliament. Every time I try to do research on Parliament, I see that these are institutions that are less researched. They have influence on our lives, but most of us stay very far from Parliament. So by show of hands, how many of us have visited our national parliaments? Ah, okay, very good. Fair enough. At least a visit, at least a tour. Yeah, so I move something very fast. Yeah, so the potential for data in the AIDM, I've used a different slide. It's the one that I landed on. I didn't know that every stream had a different color, so apology for that. So we know that the potential for data is to help us to build, to use what we already know, but more important, to introduce us to what we don't know. And especially in the context of Parliament, because Parliament is where decisions are made on issues of the people, from the budgeting to the legislation to the representation function, where we are bringing the voices of the people to Parliament. And so the decisions here that Parliament need to make is about the policy options out of our oversight. What policy options are we seeing that are coming from the government and addressing the needs of the people? Effective interventions or are they ineffective, so that we take decisions on them. Issues of consequences of some of these policy interventions, mode of delivery. Sometimes Parliament is faced with a situation that resources have been allocated, but the government is using a very unfriendly or not people-centered mode of delivery for some of these programs. And then we find that there are people who are being left out. Sometimes resources that are required to implement some of these policies are really higher than what the country can afford. The aspects of cost-benefit analysis. And of course, in the world today, we have to talk about sustainability, both for the environment and the programs that we are doing. But most important is that the data for decisions in Parliament is driven by the agenda, the global agenda, specifically Goal 16. And Goal 16 is calling us to the same reason that we're here today, for government, for inclusion, and for the future, to promote issues of accessibility, but also equal issues of equity, issues of justice, accountability, transparency, and responsiveness. So that is the key, the reason we're here this year is to look at how we integrate this. So all these are within the core mandate of Parliament. When you look at the 4 roles of Parliament, I've touched on this again, the aspect of oversight, the aspect of legislation. Are we having relevant legislation to support implementation of our programs? Are we approving and appropriating necessary budgets to implement activities that we want to see? And do we have the voices of the citizens, the voices of the people being put into consideration in all that we talk about? So in terms of demystifying data science in parliaments, many times people think that parliaments don't need information. There are people who are using guesswork. Many times I tell people that I work in parliament, they ask me, so you mean parliament has staff? They think it's only MPs who sit there. And so why we want to see parliament being given more information and being put at the center of this is to enhance transparency and accountability again. We look at voting patterns and track how resources are allocated. We want to streamline legislative processes, and so evidence coming in timely helps us in this process. But also we want to see that the things that we do, we don't want Parliament to be cut off from the people. The Parliament of South Africa and the Parliament of Uganda, both of us, our vision is to be people-centered Parliament. So we want to see people at the center of whatever that we do, so that we are not totally off, and also to be able to predict when there is issues of risk and see how to mitigate. And that's why we are looking at the theme in this conference on the future. So in terms of the application of knowledge management or science and what is the role of knowledge managers in the context of Parliament, we've seen things that other people out here don't know about. And there are trends within Parliament that are unique, that you will not be able to understand until you really pick interest in the institutions of Parliament. So in Parliament, we do a lot of discussion, and that's why it's called Parliament. It's about talking. I think it's a Latin word, on talking. And sentiment analysis is very important for us to be able to analyze speeches, to analyze public sentiments and engagements within committees. So as knowledge managers, this is a very good input that we need to see how to start from. Predictive analysis of legislative outcomes. When we pick interest in what Parliament does, we are able to follow issues of ideological groupings and understand how do different parties, how do different groups, how do policy and power dynamics work within Parliament, and at the end of the day, how do these influence decision-making. Resource optimization and forecasting, it's also an important area for us to look at as we prioritize investments and identify areas of funding. An aspect of time series, analyze the number of bills that have been introduced, that have been passed, because sometimes before we introduce new bills, every time we bring new bills in Parliament, there's a cost to it. There's a whole process of committees sitting, there's a whole process of people going to the field to go and pick views of the public. So there's a whole cost to it. So it's important for us to pick interest in issues of time analysis, to examine the voting patterns of different issues that have emerged in the country, the impact of these voting to policy changes, and be able to model frameworks that can help Parliament to perform even better. I just want to also introduce this to you, that parliaments, as they are not just consumers, but they're also producers of data. And this data is also very important for us to be able to make decisions, especially in the development world. So Parliament produces legislative data, the voting records. They're able to give us an idea of how bills, amendments, and motions create a difference. On bills and legislations, we are able to track the journey between the draft stages to the enactment. Procedure data, every time we have plenary sessions, every time we have committee meetings, every word that is spoken, every submission and documents that are tabled in the House, they have very good input in development discussions, and so we should be able to pick interest in what Parliament does so that we pick some of these documents. Parliament engages so much with the public through petitions, through social media, through opinion polls and surveys. These are also very good information for us to pick as users of evidence and processing this data for other use in all our activities when we are assessing things of governance, things of citizen voice and public engagement. And lastly, the administrative data on issues of member profiles. Sometimes it's good to know who are our members, what's the unique features about them. One of the key strategies in communicating evidence is when we get to understand who our members are, we identify evidence champions and empower them to be able to have the evidence in time when there are issues on the floor of the House. The parliamentary budget and expenses, when you talk about good governance, there's also a call to hold parliaments to account to themselves and to the citizens. So it's important for us to analyze how Parliament is spending its budget and also issues of expertise and data so that we identify areas that we can build capacity for Parliament. So just lastly here is about how do we want to move from knowledge to data to communication to ADM and lessons for the future. So this picture here is the impression of the Uganda Parliament. And some of the things that we have learned is passive provision of evidence does not work. Parliament, they require that when you start a journey with them, you see them through. And most times we find that information is brought in a very disintegrated manner. Data is brought in and it's not packaged in a way that can easily be interpreted. So passive provision doesn't work. The process needs active facilitation, and that's why we have the role of M&E research units, part of another presentation that I'm going to make after this. I'll be going specific on how knowledge brokering has facilitated evidence use within Parliament. Building the capacity of managers, decision makers, and stakeholders is key. We have a situation where members of Parliament come from different backgrounds in terms of education and qualification and age and gender. Everything is different, but these are the people who have been voted in. They are representing the mandate of the citizens. So we have to work around in building their capacity. Establishing formal structures is very important. Ensuring that there's relevance in whatever we are bringing to Parliament. Practical and realistic. So parliaments operate with very tight agendas. There are times when we are considering the budget. There are times when we are looking at issues of policy and legislation. And then there are times when Parliament is focusing more on oversight. So as a knowledge broker, as someone who is into knowledge management, you want to intervene to influence decision making, you need to understand the Parliament calendar and know when to intervene to make your information relevant. It should be also specific. Yesterday, I posted a question on WOVA. Should we put recommendations in our evaluation reports or should we not? And I've seen many evaluators who say we don't need to recommend. So if you don't need to recommend, where do people start from? We would rather have the recommendation there and people make a choice of whether they want to take them on or off. But at the end of the day, we need to give people a bit of where to start from and some bit of direction. Packaging is very important. And here the principle of 1-5-25 in terms of the pages, policy briefs is very important. And also building a sustainable evidence system. I think I'm done. Thank you very much for God and my country.
Thank you very much, Josephine. And I think that the red was a good touch. It actually shaken the room a little bit. It made it even more special, so don't worry about that. I think you raised our confidence in Parliament, at least for a few minutes today. So thank you also for that. And now, last but absolutely not least, our fourth speaker, and pardon for my accent, Mr. Wen Shipon. Right. He's going to speak in Chinese, so get your set ready. And let me give a shout out to the incredible translators that we have at the end of the room who are helping communication through this conference. So Mr. Wen is a senior engineer and system integration project manager with a double master's degree in computing and engineering management. He has been deeply engaged in integration of engineering and digitalization for many years and led the research, development, and implementation of multiple projects and products. Shipon has specialized on innovation and digitalization of urban infrastructures and is very committed to help customers manage projects and make decisions based on big data and artificial intelligence. Look forward to hearing from you more about your work in the construction industry to reduce data noise for better decision making. Over to you.
Okay, so a meeting group have to prepare the translation tools. So I don't want to waste the translation tool. So I don't want to speak Chinese. So, so Anna have told me I must to reduce my slides before the meeting. So, you know, I want to share you how we do this big data and the digital ability to focus my ability. So next I will speak Chinese. 所以今天我分享的主题是降噪。正如前面3位嘉宾讲，其实他们都提到几个关键词 keywords： 沟通、信任以及工具。其实我觉得在做整个这个决策的过程中，就是我们要注意一个点，就是你说了什么并不重要。你的客户或你想让他听到多少更重要，所以说表达和接收之间是有一个误差的。这个误差其实是我们在数据和决策过程中重点要解决的问题。这个问题是我问 ChatGPT， 他给我的回答。所以说他给我的回答里面有3个关键词，我觉得跟我今天主题是契合的。第一个就是关键的这个透明度、工具和沟通，所以这个是主题。然后我刚刚讲了，就是我们之间沟通的很重要的一个环节，就是要降噪。就我们很多时候从数据到决策过程中，我们表达了很多内容，但是其实我们接收者并没有理解到，因为他们的教育背景、专业背景都不一样。所以这个里面降噪是整个关的过程中很重要的点。如果在座有从事通讯或数字化领域，其实也很知道，在这个过程中降噪、消除噪音是数据传输以及理解数据很重要的一个点。所以如何降噪，其实我觉得其实就是这个我们叫中文翻译叫数据经纪人哈，但是其实我不太理解这个数据经纪人在这个实际的中文应该怎么更准确的一个翻译。其实我理解，所以回到我的这个行业，我们来给大家分享一下我们是怎么解决这个问题的。我其实所在的是城市基础设施建设行业，然后大家都知道，中国过去很多年建了世界上最高的楼，用了世界上最快的速度。也建了世界上最大体量的城市基础设施建设，但是带来一个问题，这个问题就是我们浪费了很多的钱。这里面的过程是因为我们的速度很快，所以决策的质量不高，所以我们造成了很多比例的浪费和变更。第二个呢，我们的数字化程度又很低，所以就造成了我们花了很多钱，但也浪费很多钱，所以这个是一个现状。所以这其实也在政府现在新的评估体系和决策体系里面，他们要考虑的一个新的问题，怎么解决这个问题？第一个解决的就是工具的问题。这是过去几十年，大家在座各位知道，我们去交付或者是设计各自房子的时候，我们交付的东西，我们是这样来干活的。但是这样干活，在座如果没有学工程的，没有工程背景，你能看得懂吗？所以大家看不懂。所以第一个就是我们数据到决策之间要解决一个沟通的降噪问题，要用过更好的一个工具。所以用到更好的工具的问题，所以这里面我们就要把专业、把管理跟新的工具结合起来，表达我们新的内容，这样我们的决策者在评估他的决策的时候，他才会有更好的一个决策依据和决策思考。所以我举个例子，我们是做设计的 ，T10，我来自 T10，是一家国际的工程公司，我们在全球设计了上百座桥梁。我们在做桥梁的时候，如果用刚刚那种2维图纸 CAD 给你看，你一定看不懂。但是如果你是一个政府决策单位，我让你这样来参与，用这种数字化参数的方式参与到整个设计过程中，你的决策会更清晰，也更精准。你知道，你动了这个锚以后，动了这个缆索以后，你会对整个城市、对整个区域产生什么样的影响？这是第一个。第二个，如果你是一个城市的市长，然后你来修一条路的时候，你知道修建以前和修建以后，它会有什么变化？所以这是一个真实和未来的实时对比。所以这个其实是用这种新的表达方式和工具，能够帮助我们的决策者更好的去决策， 更好的去评估他们所有的决策所带来的实时影响，而不是我现在这个决策，我隔了1年、隔了5年以后再来评估会有什么影响。所以这个其实就是新的工具带来从数据到决策影响。就大家可以看到，这是我们设计的道路交通，它建设前和建设后，这是我们给一个领导汇报的时候的素材，他会很清楚的知道拍板哦，我要拆迁哪些地方，我要建设什么内容，所以非常清晰。所以工具的重要很关键。OK。第二个，你看不懂图纸 ，can play it， maybe。好，这个地方有一个没有播放出来。其实这里有个 AR 的东西，可以展示。所以在我们整个城市基础设施从前期到运维的全生命周期，如果我们都用这种新的工具去做建设和管理的话，对于我们所有的这种非专业人士和政府的领导，他其实对整个城市建设过程中，他会大大的浪费他很多减少的钱。这个其实是非常重要的一个点。所以这里面就需要很多数据。数据就像刚刚大家看到，有我们城市的经济数据、人口数据、建筑的数据、气象的数据，所有的数据都会汇集成一个 database 数据库，然后基于这个数据库，我们的政府就可以实现一个看板，能够看到我整个城市基础设施建设的实时的进度、投资、质量、安全，实时 in real time 的情况，它可以实时看到。所以不用再有，我们不会把评估和决策分开，而是把评估和决策融为一体。这才是我觉得我们用数字化去改变我们从 data 到 decision 中很关键的一个连接。所以我们可以实时的去调度做这个事情。那同时可以这样做到，那我们每一个城市基础设施的建设项目，甚至一个片区的项目，我们都可以在一个小的平台上或者 platform 上去进行调度和管理。我能知道它未来建成以后是什么样子，它建设过程中是什么样子，未来建成以后还会是什么样子。所有的这些数据都存在的我们的整个系统里面，就大家刚刚讲的一些我们的 platform 和一些系统 system。那这些系统我们可以实时看到，这些数据会沉淀成我们的数据资产，这些 data assets。这些数据资产会成为未来政府再去决策或者再去新建城市项目时候一个新的经验的数据库。所以这个我们觉得从大数据或者是人工智能的角度，怎么样去帮助它更好的决策和评估，这是一个点。那所有的这些数据都沉淀完了以后，我们可以做什么呢？我们可以基于这个 digital twin 去帮助我们的政府从城市的治理、从项目的管理、从未来整个片区的运营的角度，实现一体化的这种管理。那其实可以实现的情况是，can play，somebody can help me to click the presentation。可以 click it，just click it，yeah。So， 如果我们有了整个城市的数据，那我们在整个城市的大城市的管理过程中，我们就能对它的经济、安全、交通、社会治理所有的实现实时的调度和管理。这个对于我们整个城市未来的建设和政府的决策和评估，我觉得是更具有深远的一个意义。这是我们实际做的一个项目，就大家可以看到，其实，所以我们就把这个降噪，就是你原来你不懂工程专业，但是如果你看这个东西，我们叫所见即所得，就你看到的跟我看到的都是三维，都是一样的，所以大家对这个事情的理解会拉到一个事情线，这才是沟通的前提。沟通的前提，第一个是信任，第二个是我们理解是一致的。这个非常关键。如果我们信任，但是我们理解不一致，决策就会有偏差。但是我们用这种方式，我们的理解就是一致的。所以，所有的历史数据沉淀完了以后，它就可以形成循环。这种新的循环，就是我们未来的决策和评估里面，可以真正做到基于数据，用智能化工具去实现实时的评估，而不是过后评估。因为我们很多决策是做了，隔了几年再来去判断到底怎么样。但这种方式就是我们可以推演、预演和实时评估做的方式。所以我觉得最重要的东西，从我们的数据到我们的决策，最重要的点就是我们要把数据传输过程中的这些 noisy 全部去掉、降噪，再拉到一起。所以这才是我觉得我们去做的，在我们这个行业的一些经验，给大家做分享。Thank you everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You brought us to another planet, honestly. But I think it made me think about, one of the tools that we use in communication about storytelling and the hero story, and made me think about how sometimes when we formulate recommendations, we're really not able to project how the future could look like. So we are very good in saying, this is not work, this is what it is, and then really vague about the future, but we are not able to go where you brought us from that perspective. So thank you so much. So I'm gonna do something radical, which is change the way that this session was formulated. And we have such an amazing speaker that I'm sure they will come along with me. I know there have been a lot of questions on Hoover, and there is interest. So let me get how many people would like to ask questions to the panelists first, and then we can come with the prepared questions maybe later if there is. Okay, I see 3 hands. Let's start maybe with this, and then we can... Are you on for this? Okay, perfect. So there will be 2 mic on. There will be 2 questions here, and then Ada, I see you there. So first is... okay, perfect. First here and there. Okay. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Mahmoud Said. I'm the M&A director from Somalia. I have a question to the first presenter. The first session was about building trust. So sometimes we produce reports as a M&A department, and we deal with issues where funds are mismanaged, and or there is a diversion. So people might know the findings because they know what they have already done. So before we start the process, they already know what will the findings be. So they may not even, they may say that the process has been, you see, they will always put loopholes and try to criticize. Because before we even start the process. So how do you deal such scenarios? That's my first question to the first presenter. But the second presenter was about again evidence and decision making. You talked about producing 700 reports in a year. How do you do? How do you produce? Because it's actually, from our own experience, it's actually hard to produce those reports. Sometimes we don't produce reports, it's just to produce reports. So we always focus on qualities, or we focus on sectors. So yeah, what is the scenario or the rationale behind of producing 700 reports in evaluations in 1 year? To the third presenter from Uganda on parliament, from data to decision making. You see, sometimes parliament is independent organ within the 3 arms of the government. But the executive branch is always more powerful than the parliament. So sometimes with the product or the reports we produce are not actually taken seriously. The parliament do not actually use, because they may not have actually influence in that regard. So how do you deal such scenarios when parliamentary committees, I mean, the executive branch is more powerful than the parliament, and the parliament are not unable to held accountable to the executive branch or the government. For example, our ministry. Our ministry is Ministry of Planning, Investment and Economic Development in Somalia. We report to a parliamentary committee called Committee of Budgeting, Planning, Finance. But we feel that decisions are not made based on evidence. So the fourth presenter was actually a nice noise reduction. I've never seen, but excellent. Yeah, it's good. We have learned to reduce noise. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We get the two other questions, one here and the third one will be Ada.
I would like to say thank you very much to all of the presenters, but also thank you and congratulations to Zhipeng. It is rare that my mind is ignited during a presentation, and that's absolutely what happened. Anna, you opened by speaking about mind space. And what I would suggest and where I want to sort of bring my questions is we need to expand it. I think our entire approach to how we think about and engage with utilization of evaluation results isn't only analog, it's pre-analog compared to where we need to begin thinking of where to go. Patricia, you said information is power and you need to be able to access it easily. Kristen, you mentioned integrate M&E systems knowledge with relevant processes. And Josephine, you spoke about passive provision of evidence does not work. And then what I loved with some of where you took us, Zhipeng, was visualization, and as you also touched on, Anna, future imaging of impacts and solutions to be able to make visible the differentials if we were to adopt lessons or different practices. And you said you brought us to another planet, and I think that's where we need to begin to envision and to think, what would another planet that actually fits the needs of the field and of utilization of the massive amounts of information and lessons identified but rarely even understood or engaged with in evaluation take us. So just some thoughts. We still have huge challenges with models, approaches, and quality of a lot of evaluation that is done. But if we were to evaluate evaluation, I think the break point, the weakest link, is our current failed model and approach, even the fact that we call it communication of results and dissemination. That's hugely important. But what I would propose, and maybe I'm using the wrong languaging too, but orienting more to is utilization, change management, understanding how to integrate findings and lessons identified into performance, operations, decision-making at every single level, and systematically being rigorous in mapping where does change happen, where does that information need to go, who needs it and in what way. We did a study over 10 years ago where we looked at over 1,000 evaluations. They were on average read by 3 people or less. Almost never the people who needed to see them. We do executive trainings on evaluations where we started by taking about a dozen evaluation reports and dropping them in the garbage, because in many contexts, in many sectors, that's the only place they effectively go. Sometimes it's the engineers, sometimes it's the people making different qualities of cement, sometimes it's policy and decision makers at different levels, but where do we need to plug in the knowledge, the tools, the lessons for them to actually impact? And looking a lot more at a mindset of not only learning and improvement, but also utilization, application. Kristen, you mentioned building a bridge, and I think that's important, but I think more looking at how do we create a joined up, integrated, connected system so that what we are harvesting and bringing forward in evaluations can actually feed into improved performance across many different spaces. And just the last bit, not saying it has to be done by evaluators only. So you can have whole discussions about the role of the evaluator and all of that. It's not necessarily relevant. It's that there's a systems need for it, and we have to begin to reimagine and look at how we do it. But thank you very much to all the presentations.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy that I open up this because I think we're getting more and more from people. So we will continue to do it, but we need to be mindful, we need to be concise otherwise. No, it's wonderful. It's not a critique to any of you, but just be mindful when you speak to be concise. Ada, over to you. Can we get the microphone over there? Thank you. That's fine. We can continue.
Okay, I would also echo the previous colleagues that have intervened. in the sense that I would like to congratulate you for bringing us this topic that is so, so relevant, especially in a post-truth era. I think that the presentations that have been made are really, really thought-provoking, very well done. What I think we probably need to go more in depth about is the highly political environment where decision-making is done. So I think that's an area that's important to discuss, especially in a conference like this, where it's mainly targeted to government officials and to policy decision makers. So I think that is important. And that's a topic we have been struggling with, together with Finland, with the VAL, with UNICEF, because we are dealing in supporting countries to do country-led evaluations of the SDGs. And that's an area where I would say one of the most challenging areas. And what we have, after discussions, after several trainings, interactions with governments, come up with some ideas, being one of them, that in order to really, for an evaluation to be influential, it has to depart from the assumption that it has to be used with policymakers in a highly political environment. And that not everybody is willing to take this evidence for making decisions because the evidence is rigorous, because it's well communicated, because it's friendly communicated, etc. If life would be like that, I would say probably we should have studied a different thing. So it's important to take that into account when it comes to conceptualize the evaluation. And to conceptualize the evaluation not on a nice office, etc., but in a participatory way, meaning participatory with real representation of the stakeholders, not the number of stakeholders. It's the real representation of who has a stake on it. And include methods, not only for data collection, and I would say experimental, quasi-experimental, interviews, focus group, all of this is okay. And depending on what we're evaluating, a good combination, it's also okay. But also policy dialogues. Policy dialogues that will happen with reference groups, representing the stakeholders, etc. And policy dialogue has to go throughout the evaluation process. And we also have to depart from the assumption that not everybody, not every policy decision making is willing to undertake evidence. Many of them are actually advocates of post-truth, implicitly or explicitly. So the political dimension, I think it's very, very important. And when Christian was explaining, I think that's actually something, the way he presented it, something that happens in some countries, indeed of Latin America, Chile's being one of them. I was thinking of my country, where the Congress is just demolishing democracy. So how can we deal with evidence in context where democracy is not being very respected? So we have different scenarios. So it's no one size fits all. And I think those discussions have also to take place. So I don't want to take more of your time. Congratulations, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Ada. I will give the speakers a chance to reply to this very thoughtful insight. More than question, is really a lot of food for thought. So I start with Christian and Patrizia, and then we move on to this side. Christian.
Good, and very good question. Let me start with a story. I'll bring myself 5 years before, when I was in charge of the evaluation department at the secretary and the undersecretary of crime prevention in Chile, And we did a very good, very light targeting evaluation, This was a crime prevention program in where gangs were operating, And we have the sense that sort of 25% of the programs were poorly targeted. It was really strong crime where it's not happening there, so we need to pull that programs out of those neighborhoods and bring to neighborhoods where really the problem was very strong, And this is about impacting lives, really. Game changer, So we did this targeting evaluation really hard. It implies geospatial data, defining different things, And I presented the report to my boss. It's a 5-page, very concrete, what we need to do. Like neighborhood A, we need to switch it. B, you need to do this, It was very well communicated, articulated. And when I gave the report to my boss, his question was, why you did this? I was the head of the evaluation department, So it was kind of a difficult question for me, More existential sort of question, And why he was asking this? Why he made me this question? Because of politics, He didn't care about the evidence for decision making. He cared about the political problem that those recommendations were going to give him, The problem of taking a neighborhood away from a major that was going to make a complaint that was going basically to create him a problem. So we need to understand that there's a first group of decision makers that might not prefer to make decisions based on evidence. That's its reality, and especially the reality of people that works in governments. So here I go to answering my first question. As an engineer, I want to propose you a radical way of thinking things and doing things. So we always talk about this sort of like train of thought about producing evidence, communicating, and decision making. Why don't we flip that? Let's produce decision making based on evidence, and then we use communications for that decision making to stick. It's a game changer. In some contexts, we can do it. Behavioral research science have shown us a lot of times that if you make the default option the evidence one's option, like you make it by default, it's very likely that that decision is going to stick, right? So instead of us trying to convince decision makers by communication for taking the decision based on evidence, let's us try to make the decision, the correct one, the default, and give the others the role of communicating if they want to change our decision. Or let's use communications on our side to persuade that the correct decision sticks. Of course, this cannot be done in all contexts, right? You cannot, as technical guys, make the decisions for parliamentarians, But what they did in the budget office in Chile was something that was very close to that, They gave a tag that basically was not making the decision, but on some sort of way signaling what was the correct decision that made it really easy for the decision maker to make the decision that the technical guys wanted the decision makers to make, So this brought me to my question, to answering my second question about the reports, 700, yes, but there's very standardized process. It's a very light report. It's not, don't imagine this is a 30-page report. It's something very, very slim. But in the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how long it is. What really mattered about this was the tag, was the condition or unconditioned way of the programming when they started the budgeting process, It's this idea of flipping the process, helping decision makers to make the right decision by the default, by setting up the default, the correct decision as the default way to go, That brings me to the second question. The obstacle, if in the first type of profile, the obstacle is politics, then we also have a problem of abundance of information, Sometimes we think that just by producing more pages of report, we will achieve the right decision. It doesn't work that way. Less is more. Less is more. And big data is helping us to get to really concise decision and produce and analyze and process tons of amount of information to really the outcome to be the right decision to suggest, hopefully by the default option, so that that decision stick. I really think we need to talk about this way more. So now I have a question for you, and I want to ask you something, and I want to, I honestly think that this type of session needs and deserves to be in the plenary of this type of conference, right? Because communication and decision making is transversal to everything that we are talking in evaluation, right? So, for the future of these type of spaces, I will invite all of you, to put this topic in the forefront of the discussion in these type of spaces, because we really need to flip things in the way we think, how we are making decisions, and how we are engaging this bridge, or building this bridge in between evidence and decision making. Might be not only necessary to build the bridge, might be able to help decision makers to cross the bridge, without they even noticing it. We can flip things and turn things around. Thanks.
Well, I couldn't agree more, Christian. Having worked in communications for many years, it means that the work that we do is always coming last, trying to embellish the message and try to get clicks so that everybody is happy. And that's pretty much what everybody sees when they think about communications. So I totally agree with you. We need a change in management, and we need a change in management everywhere. In the institutions, in the government, in the way we produce evidence, in the way we communicate, how we engage. To Ada's point, I think that participation and stakeholder consultation, it is essential. It is the only tool, I think, we have to counter the politics, the bad politics, right? There is all kinds of politics, but the bad politics are the ones that are preventing governments to make decisions based on good data, decisions that are going to improve the policies, and they are just going to serve the needs of a few. So how we do that, to your first question, right? There is no answer, and every context is different, but I think that the issue of involving people, and a lot of people, and saying this is why we are doing the evaluation, this is the data showing the before and after, this is the reason why we need to understand what is happening, has to be really brought to the surface and publicized as much as possible. I think that is one of the tools that I could think of to counteract criticism that are kind of preemptive when we do evaluation, right? And try to undermine the credibility of the evaluation process. Other is to have champions. I think in several of the sessions that we had throughout these past 2 days, I heard many people saying, I've been championing evaluation in my unit or in my department, in my ministry, because this is something important. We want to improve our policies. And we do have the need to use these people and to give them a platform. It's very easy for criticism to find their way through the noise and to be publicly heard. We need to do and find a way to do that, also for good information. And these require a change in management. This means that the sharing of knowledge on how to do things, on what we already know, what we need to know, has to be publicly advertised and made it available to everybody, so that everybody can come and say, hey, you said you were going to do this, you said you were going to talk about this. What is the information? And that brings me to another point that I think is often overlooked. When we're talking about capacity building, it's not just about the technical. It's about really building the consciousness of people about how am I going to be a good citizen, right? How am I going to use this information for enhancing my work? And I don't think we talk about this enough. We relegate capacity building always on training, or I need to learn how to do a PowerPoint, I need to learn how to tweet better. It's not about that. It's not about how to make just a better evaluation. It's also about how you create capacity to ask for information, to be critical. And we need to have that space in our companies and organizations as well.
Perfect. Thanks so much. I'll take 1 minute while I transition to Josephine. There is one thing that it's a sort of a credo we go to in our unit, that is to have a strong back and a soft front. So that's how we should go about in evaluation, that we believe. The fact that you open up, that you start engaging more, it doesn't mean you're weak. So if you have a strong back. So it's a subtle line to walk. And I think that the change, it's a lot about politics, but it's a lot about the posture of evaluation as well. I will give you that food for thought and then give you to Josephine.
Thank you. I think the three questions are around the same issue of how parliaments can be made more effective. And there are opportunities that I see that we can tag on. One of them is the issue of peer learning. The UpNode, the Africa Parliamentary Network on Development Evaluation, and the Global Parliamentary Forum on Evaluation, they bring together parliamentarians from across different parliaments to share knowledge and experiences. Because we don't have a college or an institution where parliamentarians learn specific things on how to do their work, they can only do this through peer learning. In a highly political environment, I'll look at my parliament, and we have a strong office that is facilitated or funded, the Office of the Leader of the Opposition. We have policy analysts there who independently provide information. The same with our research department, who can also give information to the opposition. And there's a strong legal framework that allows the Office of the Leader of the Opposition or the opposition leader himself to provide alternative statements. So whenever we have a budget speech, whenever we have the State of the Nation address, our constitution requires that the opposition also submits its budget speech. It also tables its State of the Nation address. So if we strengthen our democratic principles and frameworks, then at the end of the day, it also helps on the side of using evidence. So when they bring these alternative policy in the floor of the House, the opposition office can even go in the field and do its own evaluation of a program and bring these reports on the floor of the House. Then we have an alternative voice. Many times we've seen the government side pick up some of this. They will not want to directly acknowledge, but you will see that when they are reporting back the next time, they will come and say, government has decided on 1, 2, 3 things, and when you follow it, you see that it actually came in from the opposition side. So in one of our mother tongues in Uganda, it says, "Echigochimu, the chirimeso mwana kutambula," like the fall of a child. When a child is making one step, when they're learning to grow, the fall of that child should not stop the child from learning how to walk. So we keep going. It is hard. The politics is hot. Sometimes the environment is really like not what you expect. Political parties sometimes go into their caucuses. They return the next day when they have moved goalposts. They have shifted the original ideas that you had given them. But we keep going because this is the world that we live in. We just keep encouraging ourselves and also picking out political champions. And the reason I talked about profiling, when we get to know who stands for what, it becomes easy for us to pass information strategically through them, and they be champions in spaces where we are not there. Thank you.
Okay. Maybe my presentation is a big challenge for the translator because Chinese word is more precise, clearly meaning for the translator. So I speak Chinese to my because 在中国里in Chinese word 在中国里面有一句话叫曲线救国。Yeah, you see. 我们做评估或我们做咨询的时候一样的，我们为客户服务，我们经常会区分2个事情，第一个叫事实，第二个叫观点。事实是客观的，就是它是客观存在，就是我们的证据收集起来以后，它是客观存在且描述的。但是有一个东西是观点，观点是主观的，就是我们要主观去表达。所以当大家都提到说这个有一些政治的影响，有客观环境的影响，我觉得它影响的是观点。它不影响事实，所以我觉得我们在做这个评估、做服务的时候，我们应该想尽办法的去用更好的手段和工具，去让我们的 接收人能够理解我们的观点，从而达到我们的目的，而不是去改变这个事实。所以我觉得这是一个就是底线原则的一个问题。第二个，我觉得是挑战。中国有一句话叫"挑战就是机遇"。我们所有人都在谈论挑战，就面对这样的问题、那样的问题。但我恰恰觉得，所有的存在的问题，就是我们能够去解决它的机遇。所以说，我们能够用更好的技术、工具、手段，去把我们想要实现的观点，让我们的接收人能够理解、能够实施。我觉得这是我们作为评估者也好，作为咨询方也好，能够去做的很重要的一个事情。所以这里面，我觉得就是要我有几个观点，就几个个人的观点，这里不是事实，是观点。第一个就是中国有句古话叫"读万卷书，不如行万里路；行万里路，不如阅人无数"。所以我们要建立更多的桥梁，吸收更多的观点，听取很多人之间大家对这个事情不同的表述，我们才能够理解每一个人他的观点背后代表的立场是什么，所以我们才能有更好的手段去让他理解，驱动他做更好的决策。这是第一个，我觉得，所以我刚前面几位嘉宾都提到了关于这个桥梁的重要性。第二个，我觉得要用好技术和手段。当今社会技术的发展层出不穷，但是我们在我们很多传统的行业里面，如何用更多的新技术和手段去改造这个传统的行业，其实我们做的还不够。所以我觉得这些都是我们的机遇和点。就像可能是我刚刚展示一些，只是在我这个领域做的。但是我相信，在各位的这个领域里面，你们在面对不同的专业背景、不同的决策者、不同的这个主体、不同的民族、不同的信仰的人的时候，我们也要思考用什么样的方法和手段去说服他们。这个其实就是现在更多的技术和做的。我其实特别赞同第一位嘉宾讲的，就是关于信任的问题，或者你代表谁的问题。中国还有一句古话叫"你是谁并不重要，你背后站着谁很重要"。所以第三点，我想表达的观点就是，我们要找更权威的主体、更权威的机构来代表我们。所以说，我觉得3点很重要。第一个就是找很好的背后的这种权威的官方发言渠道。第二个，用更好的技术手段和工具去展示我们想表达的观点。第三个就是我们要不断的搭建更多的桥梁，去吸收不同人的观点，这样呢，我们才能做到充分且客观。然后最后把我们的主观让别人接受。Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love that we have so many wisdom from national culture brought in. There is this expression from both of you kind of brought to life a lot of what we're talking about. I think we have a few minutes. I would open up to maybe 2 questions, but really questions or very quick thought. And then I give it to maybe some of you to comment on, if there is any. Otherwise, I will give straight to Patrizia that she asked for the floor. There is one here? Okay, we get one here and then Patrizia, over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm Mading from the Kingdom of Lesotho. I work from the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning. I have maybe the question, or not the question from Chile presentation. I have a frustration. It happens that I've worked for 3 departments. That comes before budgeting, which is planning before budgeting. But what is happening in my country, budgeting comes before planning. So I saw the beautiful when he was talking about that the planning, the budgeting processes, and I fell in love with that. But I think my question is that how did you come about that improvement? Because I'll just say for us, we will try to do planning, but unfortunately, I think the budget, the department has the power over us to the extent that normally we can plan for the activities to be done accordingly, but you find that the budget comes with something else, and that also give us the results that are not desirable at the end of the day. So how do you come about this? Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course, I make a presentation and I make things look quite simpler than they really are, you know, because budgeting is a year cycle and planning, it's happening all the time, you know. So, budgeting comes after planning, but also budgeting comes before planning, depending on how you set the line, you know, and it's very dynamic, you know. How did they came to that? I mean, that's a good question. I think we need to, I need to address that question directly to the budgeting office and the Ministry of Finance in Chile. It's the GEI that authorizes what countries we invite to the NEC. So Patricia, for the next NEC, I will ask you to invite Chilean representatives. I think it will be very great that they all come here and have the chance to speak with you. I know a little bit more how we came to that, but I have not been working in the budgeting finance office for a decade, so I have some glimpses of the story of the trajectory, but not all the story of the trajectory. But I think, on a more perspective view, we need to start building bridges in between the machinery of government. That's the point, you know. We need to start, if we want monitoring and evaluation outcomes to make changes in decisions and improving lives, we need to connect the outcomes of the monitoring and evaluation systems to real public decisions, you know? And budgeting is really an important one, you know? Planning, design, budgeting are really important ones. So we need to put a lot of effort in improving that processes, you know? I mean, I think for me, it's something I'm trying to convey very much among Latin America and the Caribbean, you know? And as I come to spaces like this, I also realize that in Lesotho, in Tanzania, in India, in Pakistan, and many different countries we have, in Uganda, we have the same challenges, you know? So let's put a strong effort to start to find solutions to that challenges.
Yes, I just had a final reflection. We have, and thank you for coming. I see that the room is full, so it means that really the topic has been touching a lot of right chords, I would say. There is one thing that concerns me in general, is that we all recognize the usefulness of communication done right, of knowledge management done right, of being able to envision the future with new tools, with traditional tools. And yet I feel, and I see, that most of the organizations still don't put the money where they say it should be. So this is something, I wanted it to be a final message, because I don't think we are doing the right thing, and we cannot definitely have a change management if we don't fund initiatives that allow us to build capacities, to communicate, to share knowledge, to use new tools for knowledge sharing. There is a lot of hype now around AI, which is the right thing, because it is an incredible tool, but it's not all we need. And therefore, we need people that are able to use these tools to make the link between decision-making and policy-making, and data and evidence. And that is through knowledge and communication. So thank you very much for moderating this session, Anna.
Thank you so much for participating. Thanks also to all the people who have been working on the side to make this happen. Look forward to continue the conversation. I get it's just not the beginning, but a good step in that direction. So we'll continue and now enjoy coffee and the break. Thank you.